Be seeing now on your screen. Richard, you see a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, here we are. And this is the third lecture. We've talked about the evolution of the Earth from an energy perspective and the evolution of, in general, things in general. And now we're going to take a look at how this applies in particular to mammals and to our own species, and how we can understand that from an energy perspective. So now we have hypothesis one, which is probably still dominant in the Earth, that humans have come somehow from divine intervention. And incidentally, I do not wish to discredit or mock or anything like that those who have a religious perspective to all of this, because I want to say, as a scientist who studied this my whole life, the end product, humans or a sockeye salmon or anything, a tree, are so amazing. It's almost unbelievable to believe that all of the earth came here through the random process of natural selection. But that's what the evidence seems to imply. If there's some God pulling strings, and sooner or later we find that out, it would not entirely surprise me. But there, I see no such scientific evidence thus far, except that the world is an amazing place. We attribute to understanding this to Charles Darwin, who, as you probably know, took a voyage on ship the Beagle as naturalist, traveled all over South America, the Galapagos Islands off of Ecuador and other places, and was an amazingly observant person. And he eventually derived not simply the concept of evolution, because the concept of evolution was sort of in the air at that time, including work by his grandfather, but the idea of evolution by natural selection, which he came up with in one instant when he was reading Malthus's Principles of Population for Pleasure one evening. And he said, that's the issue, that each generation generates far more offspring than can replace them. And the question became, which ones were replaced? And he derived that those that were more fit, quote unquote, for the environment in which they existed. And this was I think, probably the most important single idea any human has ever had. It certainly was right up there. Now, let's look at, so all of my education as a graduate student was focused on evolution and what it meant. And so here are some of distilling innumerable graduate classes. Let's look at some of the things that were most important in the evolution of our distant ancestors. So this was 1 billion or more years ago, and that's a lot of years. 1 billion is a lot bigger than 1 million. It's 1,000 million. And 1 million is 1,000,000, and we can hardly conceive of 10 years. So anyway, the first thing is that within each of our cells, every cell in our hand, is our mitochondria. And in the mitochondria are things called crystals, and these are the little energy factories, where the energy that came into the cell, traveling as sugar in the blood and changed through very complicated chemistry into what's called ATP. That's little energy storage batteries in our cells. So an important thing life had to figure out was how to store energy, not simply in sugar, which is long-term storage, or fat, which is even longer-term storage, but in seconds and milliseconds. How do you store and move energy? And we do that with a compound called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. So that's one of the reasons life needs phosphorus. We need phosphorus atoms for our little batteries in each of our cells. And where did these mitochondria come from? It's pretty well understood that they were once free living euglena, which are little microscopes that if you took beginning biology, probably looked at through a microscope. They have a flagella, and they had within them their own mitochondria, but it seems like long ago, multicellular ancestors engulfed or ate these euglenoids, and they turned into mitochondria, and that has been transferred through each of our cells. So each of our cells has the ability to take food, i.e. sugar, and oxygen, and oxidize these materials in the mitochondria to get the energy when and where we need it to run. Look at all this process. Glucose, that's sugar, going to pyruvic acid, going to the Krebs cycle and NADH and electron transport. Woo! All of this incredible mechanisms operating each time I twitch my finger. Absolutely astonishing. Now, another big process that took place is cephalization. Cephalization is putting the sense organs and ingestion organs in a head. And the simplest form of life that has this cephalization, for example, a jellyfish doesn't have cephalization. Most single-celled organisms don't have cephalization. But starting with flatworms, we have cephalization. You put the sense organs in the head, in the front of the organism, that part of the organism that encounters the environment. So smell organs, hearing organs, seeing organs, tasting organisms, feeling organisms especially, but although they are also in other parts of the body, are concentrated in the head. Now, the next thing that came along, the flatworm has a tube that it ingests its food, digests it, and then poops out the remnants in the same tube. But a more efficient mechanism came along where the food comes in the front of the organism, like in an earthworm, and comes out through the anus in the back. So we have this idea that there's a gut that goes throughout the organism from the head, from the cephalized portion to the tail. And this greatly increases the efficiency because you can have different organisms, as we do, that do different parts of the digestion, starting with the mouth and then the stomach and then the small intestine and then the large intestine, each with particular digestive processes occurring, getting the sugar into our bloodstream where eventually it operates our cells. Now, another thing that came along, another big thing, is jaws. An early fish is a lamprey, and lampreys don't have jaws. They just have a circular mouth. And so a trout or most fish starting in the Devonian age, began to have jaws which were much more efficient at capturing prey. So these are some of the things that we have that go that were evolved through time over the last billion years that have made us the very efficient and capturing energy capturing critters that we are. And obviously all of this, gosh, where does this start? Here's animals start here and go in all these different ways. For example, starfishes and their allies are all have 5-part symmetry. We think 2-part symmetry, left and right, is the basic plan, but not if you're a starfish or a crinoid or one of those critters. And somewhere down here, we come to vertebrates, and there's our coelacanth we talked about, and then this is going up to somewhere along here came reptiles, and then mammals, and somewhere way up in the end of this, oh, here we are over here. Not more advanced than other organisms, although we might say mentally we're more advanced, but who knows what an elephant thinks. Anyway, we're here on this planet, and lots of things are no longer here. 99% of all organisms ever evolved are not here. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit more about a big event that meant we're here. And this was this asteroid that came in 66 million years ago. Now, 66 million years ago, the Earth was dominated by all kinds of dinosaurs. And by dominated, I mean they were big and they ate what they wanted, and well, that's it. And then, boom. And this is in Yucatan, if you've ever been to that part of Mexico. It caused a gigantic explosion when it hit. It was as big as a city block or something like that. And asteroids are coming into Earth all the time. Sometimes they fall and go through somebody's roof or in their driveway, and they're this big or something like this. But this was a big one. And you can see what are called centoids. I don't know how to pronounce it. These wells in a circle in Yucatan that appear to be remnants of this explosion. All kinds of evidence of this explosion occurring right here, 66 million years ago. Boom, now the Earth has drifted a bit since then. Here's South America down here forming as continental drift is occurring. And when this happened, it left a layer of iridium, which is very rare on Earth. But apparently this was an iridium-rich meteor. And you can find this iridium layer in Washington and Italy, in all various places around the Earth, where if you know where to look and where the rocks are exposed, you can find this all around the Earth. And this was the clue that gave scientists the original idea that something big occurred at that time. Boom. And in modern day, what it did, it made giant winds all over the Earth and spread an enormous cloud of dust that blocked out the sun and even apparently blocked out photosynthesis for a period of tens to hundreds or whatever of years. The impact was enormous. And these stars are where we find remnants of this explosion, ejecta, they call it. And apparently on that day or shortly after, all of the dinosaurs which were dominant in the earth went extinct. Boom, except the birds, which are dinosaurs. So that was an amazing event. Could happen, I don't think tomorrow, because we can spot them coming, but it could happen anytime. Now, a group of paleontologists found this unique area in North Dakota, Red Wing, North Dakota, south here of Williston. And I'm just gonna up here, where a bunch of stuff, apparently a big tidal wave came up the Mississippi Basin, the Missouri Basin, and happened to get deposited right here. And this guy is an amazing story. Robert De Palma in South Dakota found this place where there was a whole bunch of fossils. And these fossils included freshwater sturgeons that have this special heterocircle tail I've readily identified. And it's mixed in with saltwater ichthyosaurs and ammonites. In other words, he found freshwater and saltwater organisms in a terrestrial site that was terrestrial at the time. So a giant wave traveled up the middle of the United States and deposited all these fossils in North Dakota. And you radioactive trace them and so forth, and you find that they're all 66 million years ago. They were all dumped there by a giant tidal wave that wiped out probably most of the dinosaurs on the continent and so forth. It was a big, big deal. Now, the dinosaurs went extinct. Why are we here? Well, it is thought that at that time, there were fossorial, which is a different use of fossil. Fossil means old, but fossorial means living in the ground, that there were mammals, our ancestors, living underground at that time. This is before the meteor came in, and the surface of the earth is dominated by dinosaurs of various kinds. And these guys are underground and have storages of seeds that allowed them to live for some number of years without vegetative production, since it looked like that photosynthesis was wiped out for a number of years. And here's what they think is the first mammal that then eventually scurried out, and the vegetation recovered and the insects recovered. And so there's a mammal for you. And the rest is, as they say, sort of history. We had various rodent appearing. They weren't rodents, mammals going to lemurs, to various primitive apes. Now, humans are not descended from monkeys or from apes or anything like that. We're all descended from common ancestors, and then we went our various ways. So I'm now going to look at what happened in the human lineage. Now, humans as a species have existed from, depending on your definition, from 500,000 to 2 million years. That's just a flash of time, since, for example, this boloid came into the earth 66 million years ago. But here, let's look at humans and compare us to our relatives. These are our closest relatives. It's thought either the chimp or the gorilla, probably the chimp is closest to us. And look at a few things about us. Our face is a lot flatter. Our arms are a lot shorter. Our stature is much more upright, but not perfectly upright. I was told to stand tall when I was a kid, but you can still see that humans remain bent over a little bit at the waist here. Our pelvis rotated, and it's not well depicted here. But these are some of the main attributes of us versus the chimpanzees, which are not more primitive than us, but retain certain primitive characteristics compared to ourselves. And we, I presume, have certain primitive characteristics compared to the chimpanzee. Now, notice how we all have the same basic structure of our limbs. A single bone, an arm bone, humerus, and then a radius and ulna, the two lower arm bones, and then a bunch of intermediate bones, and then 5 fingers. Now, you find this in lizards and birds and whales and raccoons and so forth, although often highly modified for the particular lifestyles of the critters that we're dealing with. But it's all the same basic plan, indicating common lineage going back in time. And now, how did humans come to be? Well, all the evidence implies that humans came out of Central East Africa, somewhere near the country of Kenya. And I read a book a little while ago about the important things that we don't think about how geology has impacted us. And one was this relatively recent uplift of a mountain range between Sudan and Kenya. And so what does this have to do with humans? Well, we wouldn't be here had that evolution of this mountain chain not taken place. And you see, it's in this area here, this yellow area, and this is rainfall. Red is very low. That's the Sahara Desert, of course. And the blue is high, and this is a mountainous area. But this mountainous area here intercepted the northeast trade winds. And what that means relative to what we're talking about is that it created a savanna environment. This environment right here is the savanna. Now, remember, we talked about the savanna, I think last time. It's an area of grassland with scattered trees, not enough water for a forest, such as there is here in the Congo Basin, but much more water than just a steppe or grassland. So that's sort of this greenish area here. Now that's where, to the best of our knowledge, our ancestors evolved. So why is that? Now let's go back and look at these. Look at the gibbon, for example. This is a critter that is very much adapted to living an arboreal existence. He's got an opposable thumb for hanging on to the branches. Remember, we talked about this versus this. He's got an opposable thumb. He's got long brachiating, that means swinging from branch to branch, arms, and long legs as well. And we have half the length of arms compared to a gibbon. Curiously, the gibbon is relatively standing up straight. I hadn't noticed that before. Well, okay, think about that. Now, these are areas in the red dots where the earliest humans have been found. And Old Duval Gorge is a particularly important place where a family named the Leakeys worked and found lots of very, very important and interesting fossils going back in time. Now, one thing, now this is, remember, mostly in the savanna areas. Now, it's possible that there are fossils in the deep Congo and we don't find them because they're covered with trees. That's an alternate hypothesis that nobody I've heard has made besides me. So it does appear like this is where our ancestors basically came down from the trees. And when we came down from the trees, we started to stand up straight and we started to have shorter arms. And for other reasons, our skulls began to change. Now, I can still remember as a freshman taking Dr. Ramshaw's anthropology course, and he came in with all of these plaster casts of skulls. Now, I didn't know they were plaster casts. I thought, as a freshman, I thought they were the real skulls. And, Dr. Ramshaw was certainly a great hero in my eyes as an anthropology professor. But he put them up in a row, showing what happened to our skull as we evolved from proto-hominoids, that is before humans, to hominoids. And here are some of the actual skulls that are in some museum somewhere. But let's take a look at what the evolution of the human skull from Australopithecus through Homo erectus to Homo neanderthalis to Homo sapiens, and we see a great increase in cranial capacity. So apparently the gray matter became increasingly important. A reduction of prognathism. Prognathism is something your dog has, an extreme forward facing of your teeth, a reduction of the brow ridge, and to our skull today. These are things that have happened relatively recently in the last 5,000 or 10,000 years. Here's another view of those. But my anthropology professor put the skulls, or the plaster casts of these skulls, up in a row in front of me, and I was really impressed. I can remember that freshman lecture very well. Also, our canines became reduced. Many of our relatives have pretty good canines. So the jaws and teeth became smaller. Here's a better depiction of our canines. And we're different from a chimpanzee, which has larger canines. I'm not quite sure because chimps eat mostly vegetative matter. But these are empirically the changes that have taken place. Now, we were originally all heavily pigmented. And there were perhaps as many as 8 various hominoid cousins that were related to us in Africa alive at one time. So we did not evolve simply into Homo sapiens. Now, humans today, all over the world, all 8 billion of us are genetically extraordinarily the same gene pool. Very few animals, are an example, cheetahs, have as limited a range of genes as do all hominids. So we're all very, very close cousins. And let's take a look at that a little more. We were, well, as I said, we were originally designed for arboreal existence with longer arms and opposable thumbs. But as the climate drive came out of the trees and onto a savanna environment where there was a lot of benefit to standing up straight. So if you wonder why we have such big bums compared to our closest relatives, chimps and so forth, these are the muscles required for standing up straight. They pull our skeleton up straight. And so we end up with big muscles, gluteus maximus, they're called. And let's take a look at, in Tanzania, there are some footprints of humans that are 3.6 million years old, and they're indistinguishable from our own footprints. In other words, if you make a batch of mud and have a couple of us walk down, the footprints would be indistinguishable from these that we found. And here are some people that are uncovering these footprints. I guess Mary Leakey was the one who found them. They're quite amazing. And there are other animals there too. And it looks like there's people walking along together here. And this is I'm going to show you several reconstructions of what that environment might have looked like and what our ancestors might have looked like. And here are some guinea hens, footprints are there, and giraffes and elephants are also there. So this might have been one of your grandparents walking along and looking at the environment that he or she lived in. Amazing. Some people thought that these are, maybe a couple of a man and a woman walking along on a date, perhaps. Maybe this is a reconstruction of 2 of our ancestors on a date. So I think that's quite marvelous. And, they had the same mental capacity as we do, probably the same emotions, more or less. Who knows what they're thinking? Now, humans evolved in special ways, and I got a bunch of cartoons here to break it up for a minute. Intelligence was important. So here's a couple of our ancestors going after what they think is a target elephant without understanding that the tree that he's hiding behind is mom, who would do quite a number on them. Cooperation, humans are a social species, and this is really, really important. We're social species at various levels, and we're going to end up thinking about this a little bit. Language, we began to evolve. Evolve means change slowly. It can happen both physically and mentally and culturally. And look out back, it's dang, never can pronounce those things. So he's got a pterodactyl about ready to scoop him up, and he can't think of the name of the critter. In mathematics, to be able to do things quantitatively. I don't know if you catch the humor of it. This is something like Stonehenge, and these are some I don't know, scholars of the past trying to tally sheep by counting them in groups of three, I guess. And he's suggesting that maybe we could, instead of going to all this work to count the sheep, that we could do it on a piece of a clay tablet. I don't know whether people think the same way I do, but it's the funniest cartoon I ever saw in my life. Well, now this course is about energy and ultimately energy in human economies. And so let's think about energy. Now, energy is not the only resource, but it's associated with just about all of them. Other resources are usually considered water, food is, of course, energy, soil, breathable air, cooperation, language. Those are all resources. Resources mean things that help us survive and reproduce from a Darwinian perspective. Now, we were hunter-gatherers, our ancestors, for 1,000 times longer than we were farmers. So the closest we can come to understanding our ancestors is to look at contemporary hunter-gatherers. Now, you've got to realize here in Oregon, 200 years ago, there was nothing here but hunter-gatherers. No farmers. Certainly nobody who makes their living anything remotely related to ours. It was all only 200 years ago. What is that? 6 or 8 generations. That's how you made your living in Oregon. You were a hunter-gatherer, and from perhaps other OLLI courses, I don't know, you can understand their lives. And obviously it was highly impacted by the rich salmon resources here. But let's take a look at contemporary hunter-gatherers, the Coon. Now, I was very influenced in graduate school, so 50, 60 years ago, that the studies by Richard Lee of the Kung. The Kung is their language has a lot of clicks in it for grammar and so forth. Here are some Kung, and they, in 1950, they were living just as their ancestors had for many thousands of years, maybe hundreds of thousands of years. If you've ever seen the movie The Gods Must Be Crazy, which I really recommend, it's a very funny movie. It's about these people who I find magnificent, delightful, and much more attuned to their environment than, of course, we are today. But the Kung, the early studies found that although meat is a prized food item, plant foods provided the most incentives. And this is what they would do. There would be, this is from Richard Lee's, one of his papers, and there were various water holes. This is in Central Africa, more or less, very dry area. It was at that time called Buchanan Protectorate. And it was pretty much left to the Kung. And they had these water holes, and they would migrate from in groups from one water hole to another water hole. And they could carry all of their possessions with them at one time, including their children. I don't think these people are not migrating, but their physical possessions were relatively limited. And one of Richard Lee's conclusions, which I think influenced my thinking about what ultimately became energy return on investment, which is my scientific somewhat claim to fame, is that if you look at the round trip distance, that when the Kung came into a new water hole, they moved to a new water hole, then they would start by gathering their main food item, which is mongongo nuts. I mean, you can think walnuts, but special walnuts. And the women and children would gather them initially within 2 miles of camp. They'd go out on a hike with a sack, come back full of mongongo nuts, and they'd go further and further each day as they cleaned out the mongongo nuts that were near the camp. And then they had a decision. Once they cleaned out all the mongongo nuts near their camp, they had to make a big investment, eating up many of the mongongo nuts they'd already gathered, to go a second day. And they would not go a third day because the cost, which was an energy cost to them, became larger than what they would gain from the process of gathering mongongo nuts. So then they would move to a new water hole and new bunch of ungathered mongongo nuts. So these various anthropologists were writing about these people at that time and were very, very interesting to me in graduate student. Now, they thought they got most of their energy from the women and children gathering mongongo nuts, as I indicated in the first picture there, and that hunting gave some needed and appreciated protein. But my last special undergraduate student, Matt Glaub, came to me and he said, I think this is wrong, because I think there's so much energy in a kudu or other large antelope that the Kung hunters would kill, that we need to reconsider this. And so we did. Now, here's how the hunting works. You normally get an old fella. Now, I don't know who's young or old in this picture. Doesn't show exactly, but you normally get an old skilled tracker or two to go with a young fast guy or two, a young guy who is physically capable of looking for an antelope. And I found out, of chasing an antelope. Now, obviously, no human can outrun an antelope in a straight out chase. But I found all of this to be quite amazing. Now, Matt was a runner himself, and I found a lot of people who are runners that were really interested in our study, which was published. Whoop, wait a minute. I want to go back. Let's see, can you see this okay? Mine has your pictures over it there. This is published in the 2017 in the journal Human Ecology. And anybody who wants to email me, I'll send you the paper. And we look carefully at the hunting of the kudu by humans. And the idea is that humans can catch an antelope only through the process of persistence hunting. So humans, which are linear to the sun, go out in the middle of the day. They want temperatures of 100 degrees or more for their hunting, and they understand this very well. And they will just they'll walk until they see an antelope, and then with great skill, far more skill than any Westerner can bring to bear, track the same antelope as it goes over. It'll run from where they scare them up. It'll run to the shade of another tree and sit there panting. And if you do this, and it takes you about an hour to track that particular antelope, maybe 5 or 6 times, until the antelope, which is absorbing a lot of sunlight, is too hot to run. And then your young fella with a spear can run up and spear the antelope. And it's even possible that human male pattern baldness is a heat dissipation. Richard, I can't do a good job of that, but you can. Is a heat dissipation selective process for your ancient ancestors who were running down antelope or who knows what, and had to shed heat. So the idea is that all that we are evolved to make us more efficient, persistent hunters is a very interesting idea. And I found there's a lot of information in our paper here about the physiology of human running that my runner friends find very interesting. So if any of you are runners, I recommend you email me and I'll send you this paper and you'll find some interesting things. But what was most important to what we're looking at was that the energy return on investment was somewhere between 26 and 50 to 1. We thought hunting was a very high energy return on investment measure. And so the Kung, which based on mongongo nuts had a 10 to 1 energy return on investment, may have had a lot higher when you included persistence hunting. And as the anthropologists who study these people said, the way these were the original affluent society, and the way they express their affluence is in leisure. The Kung love to sit around and tell stories and play with their children and hang out in social groups. So you can take that from that whatever you wish, but it's really quite amazing. Now, the energy cost of a human running in yellow compared to chimpanzees either doing quadrupedal or bipedal, humans are much more efficient in running and walking, and that's probably why we stand up straight. That has been selected to make us more energy efficient in our walking, which became increasingly important in what humans did. Now, humans then spread out of Africa, various places, to Europe, to Americas, 15 to 35,000 years ago, all over. And 100,000 years ago from Africa, it's thought. And then from East Africa to West Africa and South Africa. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. Well, West Africans and South Africans are as genetically distinct and similar from their East African cousins as are Europeans and Asians. So Africans are not genetically one clump bunch of DNA, and Asians and Europeans somewhere else. Depends from where in Africa you're talking about. Now, humans left their cultural signatures in caves all over the place. And here's a rendition I like of uh, Cro-Magnon, a Neanderthal family. Sorry, Neanderthal, our ancestors' family, and notice the depiction here, and probably accurate, of a relatively white skin. Black skin pigmentation. Now, why are some people have black skin and some have white skin? This has led to so many unfortunate situations in human evolution, human cultural story. Um, but black skin is very useful. I was a lifeguard a lot as a kid and a swimming instructor. And I have every year I get a dozen pre-cancers carved out of my skin. All my life, this has been the case. So once I asked my skin doctor, why do I have such crummy skin? And I thought, I don't know. But then I went and did some assessment, and black skin pigmentation protects your skin. So, I asked my dermatologist if his black uh, patients had as much problem with their skin as I did, and he said almost never, occasionally, but not often. So I said, why do I have such crummy skin? Then why is my skin so unprotective for my face? I'd probably be dead of cancer were all these things not carved out of me every year. And so I did some research and found out that the melanin is very protective of your skin, but if you cover your body with skins as you move northward, then melanin is very bad for you because you don't get sunshine vitamin D. The sun shining on your skin gives you vitamin D, which protects you from rickets. And rickets is a very bad thing to have if you're a hunter-gatherer. So it appears that there was very strong selection by our ancestors against melanin in our skin to help us have vitamin D so that our ancestors, those that did contribute to today's gene pool, did not die from rickets.
Charles,
Okay.
you have a hand up from Rich.
Yeah, who's got a hand up? I can't see. Yes, Rich?
Yeah, I'm going back a bit to your slide about energy efficiency
Yeah.
of the hunters that killed the antelope. Did you account for the energy involved in returning the antelope meat back to where the
Yes.
fatality was? Because
Yes.
the further away you go to kill,
Yep.
the less efficient you're going to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
This guy, Matt, did a really beautiful job.
Okay.
Michael, do you ever turn off your microphone?
I do have a question. My question is there higher incidence of rickets in Black people?
I don't know. We all get vitamin D from our milk now, so it might be covered by
Black
that. I'll tell you what's happening today, though, that's really interesting, is that our young people that are spending their time indoors looking at screens as opposed to playing outside baseball or riding their bike around or all the thing fishing like I did as a kid. They have there's a what do you call it? Excess incidence of rickets among young people today in the United States,
Well,
which
that's
can be
startling.
treated by giving them vitamin D pills, but they get not enough sunlight. And that's a good question whether Black folks have more or less or whatever. I don't know. Okay, let's go on. Got a long ways to. Here's the family tree. that we think in most of the critters that we look at, the fossils we look at are sort of off the family tree. And here we are with a very restricted gene pool. Somebody thinks that at one time we had only 7 ancestors. I can't speak to that, but and Neanderthals, I understand we people of European extraction have about 3 or 4% of our genes are Neanderthal genes. So if you call somebody a Neanderthal, watch out, he might be. Now, we don't know where the Sasquatch fits into this. There's not enough information. Now, meanwhile, humans are having a cultural evolution. And we have to think about, for example, the Neolithic, Paleolithic, meaning old stone. These crude implements, and then they became more worked on over time, sharper and sharper, and scrapers, scraping hides was very important, and points, and very important in America's a Clovis point, or the points with the extension on the back of them to tie them onto a stick. Now, you might say this is a cultural education, cultural evolution, but it's also about energy, because what you're doing is you're increasing the force you can exert with a point by concentrating the power on a point. So here's some depiction of some of our ancestors, how they might have started out with stone tools and then over time evolved into much more efficient projectile points. Now remember, you can't not penetrate the skin of a big beast with your arm alone, but if you concentrate the same energy into a small point, you can do the work that you want to do, that's penetrate the hide of this beast. So here we have, there go the Wilsons. Seems like everybody's evolving except us. And of course, these spear points, energy concentrating devices, and fire, obviously an energy device, but in a way different than you might think. Let's see, I wanted to, I'll get there in just a minute about the fire. We also evolved herding animals. Here's where our animals came from. All kinds of things. A lot of camel, sheep, ox, goat, horse, zebu. All of these from mid-Asia somewhere. Eurasia, pig, goose, dog, rooster, buffalo, thought from over in Asia. And now they're just spread all around the world, but that's where they came from. And the next big energy transformation was agriculture. And here's the Tigris-Euphrates area. And well, we're going to come back to this in a minute. The Fertile Crescent, it's called, but really, agriculture evolved apparently independently in all these different places. Just wasn't only in the Tigris-Euphrates. But that's the one culturally we go back to. And here's what we talk about: genetic engineering, but our ancestors for 10,000 years did this genetic engineering. This was the original maize, or we call it corn, but this was genetically engineered into this without any modern genetics. It was just done by our ancestors saving the best seeds. But the problem with agriculture is that you see a natural tree or even grassland has extensive roots, and it will take up nutrients that are lost into the soil and maintain the nutrients in the soil tree system. But agriculture with much shallower roots and with a loss of about half of the biomass to harvest each year, and also with bare field erosion, loss through erosion, you would deplete the soils. That was a new problem. And you could see this. I was at a party the other night, and there were two people that were talking about Ephesus. And I said, wait a minute, I know something about Ephesus, but they were visiting there. They thought the city was a wonderful place to visit. It's over in near Greece, more or less, east of Greece. And this is where it was in the 7th century BC. It was on the side of the Aegean Sea. And here's where it was in 3rd century BC. You see, all the sediments had come down once the people that were here, including Romans, cleared the land and put in crops. And now Ephesus is 2 miles from the ocean. And because of this erosion. So here's what people originally did. And I took these pictures myself. And this is in the Amazon basin in Bolivia. And one solution to nutrient loss that at one time was feeding about 90% of the people in the world, not long ago, is shifting cultivation. Shifting cultivation means you come into a forest, a natural forest, and you cut down in a region of vegetation, you let it dry, and I don't have the pictures. You burn it. Sorry, I missed the burning picture. And then you get sediments or leftover, sediments isn't the right word, but ashes that have nutrients. You see the burnt bits of this vegetation, and then you put in your crops. And the nutrients that the forest has sequestered from you provide you enough nutrients so you can get a good crop out of that. And also, paddy rice is another Asian developed approach to nutrient retention. And here's soybeans along a path. Every square inch is used here. And when they drain the nutrients, they have special plants that are very good at grabbing the nutrients out of the ditches. So they drain the cropland into a ditch that they block for a while, and the plants grow there, sequester the nutrients, and then people pile the nutrients back onto their fields. And there were fields I saw in China that had been in constant cultivation, as far as they could figure, for 2,000 years without fertilizers. And all over Asia is paddy place. And so human civilizations developed in these various regions where they could generate energy surpluses, either through harvesting or through intense agriculture. And I just want to say, we get the word urban from the first city of the world, or one of them, here in the Fertile Crescent. And this is interesting because by the time the people came along to write the Bible, this was very old hat. It's as far back to them or more as it is from us to them. Somebody has a question. Turn on your microphone. No?
I do think that they use fertilizer on those crops in Asia, because I went there in 74 and we arrived in the middle of the night. There weren't there weren't very many people going
The
to
next
China
word
in
you're
that.
going to say is night soil.
Pardon?
Is the next word you're going to say night soil?
Yes, because
Yes.
all night long, the horse-drawn carts were leaving the city and taking the
I
night soil
stand
out to.
corrected. Without commercial fertilizers. They
Yeah.
understood nutrient cycling very well, as we do not. So thank you. Yes. Okay, here's the ancient city of Ur today, with a big, what they call a ziggurat. And here's cities in Central and South America, Central America, but we much bigger than any cities in Europe at the time. I think that's me and my wife up on one of these ancient structures. But the problem was, and the problem all of these places had, was the soil was thin. And here's a look at a road cut, and it just isn't very much soil there. And so if you look from the top of one of these cities, these mounds in the distance, mostly we've now found out are not geological features, they're ancient cities, and they're all overgrown. And so we had these huge cities that existed in southern Mexico and Guatemala and so forth, today's areas that, well, there's still plenty of people there, but not as many as there used to be at all. And there's still Romans in Rome, but they're all covered with forests. And so this has been here. I have various books that I think are really important. And here's another one, The Collapse of Complex Societies by Joe Tainter. And he said it was the development of complexity itself and the energy cost of complexity that eventually did in all kinds of ancient cultures. So you look at the complexity of our civilization today, and you have to think about this a little bit. Here's what we did in use of animals for plowing, and agriculture generated surplus. Metallurgy evolved in many different places of the world. These are the important things that influenced our cultural evolution. It's early in Peru, early smelting, or Chinese, I guess, bronze smelting. You copper and tin together makes bronze a very useful metal. And metallurgy spread over time throughout Europe. Didn't start there. Cities, organization, food suppliers, and metals allowed specialization, including granaries. Once you could store food, you needed cats to kill the mice. And that's the origin of the cats that we have, were from original wild animals that we domesticated and used to kill the mice in Egyptian granaries. And then, of course, the tax man and all the stuff that taxes support, like military. I don't know, religion is a different, not quite tax. Well, yes or no, it's called offerings. And the number of persons per hectare, or another way of looking at it from, this is 1,000,000 years ago, 225,000 hectares were available per person. And now well, this was a while ago, it's down to about 1.5 hectares available on the earth per person, so that human populations became much denser And the United States, North America is much less dense than Europe or Asia. So human densities increased, although they went up and down over time. China has good records, and Egypt had good records of the number of people that often went down as much as it went up. So this population explosion we have in many places is relatively recent. This has been studied in great detail. Human populations don't necessarily go up or don't necessarily stay stable. So is natural selection operating on humans at this time? Think about it. Medicine, vaccinations, and public health, we have much poorer immune systems than just a few generations back. There's a lower requirement for physical strength and dexterity. Is there selection now, or should there be selection for getting along with each other? Well, I don't know. We're now interbreeding in ways we didn't before. In my high school, it was very big news when Alice Amonte married Jack Ryan, and a lovely Italian lady with a Irish jock at our school. And that was big news in Hingham High School. Okay, who will determine the gene frequency ratios in the future? Who or what? And it depends on the environment. Okay, I am done. And who has some questions? Lower my hand. And I'll see if I can get all of this up on the screen.
I have a question.
Yeah.
We can see that with agriculture, more energy entered human societies, and human societies grew. So today, I think in the Western world, we rather see declining populations, right? So the birth rate is down for
barely
US and Europe.
In Europe, and the US without immigration is about flat. Christian, where are you?
I'm in Germany. So here's also declining, like birth rate is 1.5 or something, not even replacement level. And I think I heard like in China as well. So some like the big populations are stagnating or declining, but we still have a lot of energy available. So this can't be, the reason can't be energy, or is it? I mean,
no,
on the other hand, we are all getting, bigger. So each individual seems to accumulate energy, but we're not getting, we are not putting it into reproduction.
if you look at the most important thing, and it's a good question, the most important thing, demographers have studied this, that determine how many children couples have or that women have, it's the fertility analyses are done per female, is given choice in what you do in your life. That woman, when given a choice in both contraception and social mores, have given woman much more of a choice. So in the time of the American Revolution, most women spent most of their time either pregnant or lactating, both of which absolutely, as I understand, drain the woman of energy to do, human energy to do anything else. And I don't know what woman would have chosen back then. Certainly there was very high, I spend a lot of time looking at BBC stuff, British broadcasting, which I think is much higher quality programming than usually available for us. And so I look at a lot of old British restructuring of what they think their past was. And there's a sense that woman queens, especially, would get their sense of worth in their cultural power from generating children, especially male heirs. It's quite interesting because much the best queens of England, much the best rulers of England over time have been women. But somehow men thought that the rulers should be men. But given, I mean, maybe we should ask what the woman here, what insights or thoughts they have on this. So anybody who'd like to pipe in, a lady, I'd be interested in how you view this. But my own sense of the literature, of the scientific literature, on what determines human reproductive rate is one, public health, so that in the past, half the children would die before they were of reproductive age, and cultural choice, that women have other things to do in their life besides reproduce. And I know I had that when I was thinking of what I wanted to do with my life. I had options of marrying somebody and all that, and then I thought, versus fly fishing versus becoming an ecologist, and there was no choice in my mind. I didn't want to be a slave to somebody for 18 years. So
Charlie,
I
I
don't
got
know.
some stuff to say about this. There's a guy named Eric Kaufman in the UK who's written a book called Shall the Religious Inherit the Earth? And he has a concept called cultural selection that I think is quite important, that it's not natural selection anymore so much because most of the kids survive to reproduce now that we've killed infectious diseases off and so forth. But so what determines who survives, where the demography is going is how many kids people choose to have. And some cultures choose to have more, like the ultra-Orthodox in Jerusalem and so forth. And so that can change a population pretty quickly. And another thing to mention is that the demographers have been studying this demographic transition from over 5 kids to less than 2 for a long time. And there's many demographic transition theory papers about determinants of fertility and urbanization. John Bongartz did a great paper where he had urbanization, education, income, and uh, life expectancy, which is basically infant mortality. And then he added one more variable, which was about cultural selection, which was whether you were in Africa or not. And he did a regression for 137 countries. And the Africans, when you controlled for all those other variables, accounted for about an extra 3 kids for the Africans. And then there was the cultural selection was added 1.1 kid more. So that's why Africa still has 4 kids and Europe has 1.5. Is one simple
Sub-Saharan
version of
Africa,
it.
because
And there's one more thing I want to say, which is that once you get your fertility rate down, uh, I study this, so I'm sorry about my going on about it, but the once you get your fertility rate to fall to below 2.1, you still have all those kids from when the fertility was high. So it actually takes 40 years 50 years really of demographic momentum before your population peaks and then starts to decline because you got more old people than young people. So it's the birth rate versus death rate thing. And so Japan and China both uh, peaked their population 50 years later and 40% higher than when they hit 2.1 fertility and then kept on going down.
well, the pill came along 40 years later, and that was the first time birth control became easy.
Yeah, the technology is hugely important. The birth control technology got so much better. And abortion's important too. That Jeffrey Sachs said that's worth a half a child per woman to have abortion legal and
Well, we still have many people in the United States argue that we want to increase our population. And you can find various groups, often religious, that advocate that.
Since
And
we
I don't know
doubled
what happens.
population, since we
Oh,
doubled
look,
population since 1974, and already Ehrlich and Pimentel and those were saying that we were already overpopulated then. I think those guys that worry about the birth dearth are about 2 centuries too early. And another idea that occurred to me, you can think there's this concept called density dependent mortality, which is the feedback system that regulates population of most species. Humans are now maybe showing density dependent fertility in that people look around and say, I can't afford a house and I need my career. And so the pressures of overpopulation are telling people to have fewer kids. And I think that's the birth dearth explained very quickly.
according to
I
the
can't.
demographers I read, the most important thing is giving females choice in the matter.
Yeah.
And that may be a reason that sub-Saharan Africa is behind the rest of the world in this demographic transition.
Yeah, that's
But
huge too.
that's
Yeah.
very complicated. And,
Yeah.
and I'd also like to point out that density dependence is very complicated, and I've written a number of papers on that, Max, and you want to discuss that independently, we'll talk about it. Okay, Rich Kinzinger.
Yeah, I raised my hand for one question, and I want to, before I do that, I want to comment on the current discussion with respect to China. I think we all know that in Mao's time, they had a one child per family policy. And if you got pregnant a second time, you were ostracized. They have now gone not only back from that, they're encouraging not as many children as you can have, but encouraging.
But the women don't want to do that.
But the reason for that, that's true. The reason for encouraging the greater number of children is that in China, it's almost mandatory that children take care of their aging parents. And now they're getting a demographic where there's too many aging people and not enough young people. So they're trying to fill that gap. Now, the other subject or question I wanted to raise, Charles, is in agriculture, I assume that the dominant source of energy is solar. That is, fertilizer does not bring in energy, it brings in chemistry necessary to grow plants, but not energy. Is that right?
It's not explicitly energy, but for example, nitrogen fertilizer, which is the most important kind, and we're going to talk about this in some detail, is very energy intensive because we make it out of the atmosphere, which is 70–80% nitrogen, but the molecules are hooked together by what are called triple bonds, and it's very, very difficult to pull them apart. And most of the phosphorus that we get in the world is either from Florida or from Morocco or the West desert, Sahara Desert. So, and there's a gigantic beltway that carries the phosphorus out there. So
Yeah.
if world transport shuts down, well, like South America, all of South America is basically phosphorus limited. The phosphorus
I understand
there.
phosphorus brings in energy, but compared with the solar energy, I assume just from an energetic standpoint, it's relatively small.
Yes.
I'm not sure that's necessarily the nitrogen doubles
Now,
the
wait a
crop
minute,
yield,
Max.
so
Max,
it must
you
be
had your
contributing
say.
something.
Mary Ellen's turn. But Max, we'll hear you later. But let's unmute, please, Mary Ellen.
Okay. Yes, I just wanted to point out, didn't you see the row of soybeans growing down the middle of the rice paddy? Those are legumes and they're bringing nitrogen into the soil.
Yeah, they're fixing
So,
nitrogen. Yeah.
but I also wanted to point out that there weren't a whole lot of women doing other things like musicians or astronomers or in early life, because having children is a full-time job and you only have so much energy. So I
I
had
don't
3
think
children
men are
and I
very,
had a full-time job, but I
I
also
don't,
worked.
I don't think
But
men have been very good at sharing the load for children.
yeah,
So
uh,
I think that's
I
important.
think that now women don't want to, they want to do other things and they want to become astronomers and astronauts and musicians and do all the things that men have been doing. And hopefully they'll take over running the world too, because I think we would really need that.
I happen to agree with you. I think, oh my God, men are doing a terrible job of running the world. But I want to tell you, you look at the female leaders that we've had, Margaret Thatcher, Golda Meir, and others. Um, I'm not criticizing them, but I'm saying they have their own wars. It's not the so far the track record of women who've been leaders have been empirically associated with conflict, with wars, about as often as men. I haven't seen any statistics, so I don't know if I'm really right. But so we got to elect the right woman, whoever they are. You want to run for office, Mary Ellen?
I just wanted to offer a slight correction about the one-child policy. Mao actually put a demographer in jail who advocated using birth control during the 50s. Mao was for more population, more Chinese. He's an expansionist guy. It was after his death that Deng Xiaoping put in the one-child policy. And the one-child policy was actually when you go from 5, 6 kids to less than 2 kids, that's a huge reallocation of energy. Think about a plant putting its energy into seeds versus stems. We've changed from putting energy into kids into putting energy into cars
So
and houses
is a
and all the other
woman
stuff.
with 2 children as intellectually potent as a man with none? Robin.
I just wanted to say that my son is a full-time at-home dad and she makes all the money. And so I now know numerous people whose children are doing that. My son is 38. So, change takes time. It doesn't always happen in less than a generation. And that's how women are going to take over the world and stop the wars, is because the men are going to go home. And they've finally figured out how much fun it is to be home with the kids. It's awesome.
Well, I certainly hope what you say comes to pass. And I cannot say that male leaders today are giving me very much hope in male leaders.
I know.
Christian.
Yes, one more time. And it relates to what Max said about cultural evolution or cultural selection. So I would figure if we have multiple cultural groups in one country, for example, in Germany, we have a lot of Muslims living in Germany. We have Jews, and I've talked to a few people. So they have this religious base, have as many children as you can. Whereas the rest, the Christian culture or our modern culture, basically, they don't have so many children. So I would expect
I think the word you want to use is Western culture.
Western culture, yeah, that the cultures that emphasize reproduction will outgrow the others. And in 2, 3, 4 generations, these will actually dominate.
Well, it's not clear
hypothesis.
whether simply having lots of foot soldiers is going to determine who, quote unquote, wins future, let's just say, wars in the very wide sense.
And there's changes, there's defections. The high fertility cultures, maybe there's 6 kids, and then those 6 kids may have fewer. It doesn't necessarily go from generation to generation.
Boy, this is a hot topic relative to
Yeah.
Robin.
Yeah.
You have your hand up?
No, oh, no, sorry. Lower hand, got
Okay.
it.
Anybody else? How about hearing from somebody who hasn't said anything? Um,
Well,
okay, I'd like to ask if, Sarah, you have your hand up. Sarah,
Yes.
turn
Can you
on
hear
your
me?
microphone and if you are comfortable, your, um, photo, your, video.
Uh, can you hear
Video.
me? Can you hear me?
Barely.
Oh, well, this is just a comment, and it is what you were talking about, Joseph Tainter and the collapse of complex societies. It will be very interesting to see what happens from AI. Do we think it's going to destroy us? Do we think it will change our fertility practices? All of that is
I'm
going to
not,
change.
I'm not optimistic about the impacts of AI, quite frankly. I mean, but you know, I thought, I thought the increase in agricultural production per farmer would put people out of work, and we still have full employment. It's in the deindustrialization of the Midwest, yet the country still has full employment. I don't know if these former farmers are flipping hamburgers or however it works, but it's hard to predict. I have to say, I look at an AI summary of, for example, what we're doing here, and they're pretty damn good. Um, and so I don't know what it's going to mean, but I guess I'm just thankful I'm not a professor now, because I spent so much of my life correcting papers, and at least I knew a person wrote what I had. And I would certainly not want to be grading essays now, knowing it might be coming from a machine. Elaine, do you have a question?
quick comment. I just want to remind people that throughout history, there have been women who bucked the system, who felt that they didn't want to become mothers and had aspirations. Some of them even disguised themselves as men so they could fulfill what they felt their lives needed to do. And we're learning more and more about these women as more history comes
Well,
forward.
Clara Schumann was probably a better composer than Robert, but she had 6 children,
Mhm.
and her husband went nuts. And so,
There's more choices now for women the last,
yeah,
several decades. Women feel like they have more choice. They can choose not to have children and to fulfill their lives in other ways. But there have always been women that felt that way through history. I also want to say just one thing on AI.
may I just add one thing? And
Yeah,
their contributions were often suppressed by men.
yes, yes, this is true. Um, I keep reading these headlines where somebody falls in love with a virtual person. AI can create somebody who's responsive to you, and humans are falling in love with these virtual people. So, will that affect our fertility? Who knows, but just interesting.
Well, I have yet to see anybody have sex with an AI. I mean, reproductive sex. So we haven't arrived at that yet, and I'm not in a position to comment on that. So, anybody have a comment about how we're doing in the class? I thank you, those who like it, that's good, but any critical comments that can help me generate a class that meets your needs any better than it does already? Any thoughts on that? And the PowerPoints I'm putting on a site. My friend Eric is doing this with the lectures. So if you miss one or you want to look at the PowerPoints more carefully, if you want to do that now, then simply email me. Or these will be made available, or if you think something's particularly interesting and you want to share with a friend, then we're going to make all of this quite possible. But any suggestions from anybody, or we doing okay?
I read a book by Greta Keller, who's a fossil counter at Princeton, and she has a book called The Last Extinction, I think, where she says that the meteorite story was a good story that sold well, but if you actually look at the data, it was the Deccan traps in India that did something like the other mass
I'm
extinction.
aware of that.
Yeah.
There are other, I don't see that having wide acceptance, but I do know that book exists, and
If you the book convinced
who
me.
knows?
Yeah,
It wasn't there.
it's an open, it should be at least an open question, I think.
Yes, I agree. Okay.
Or maybe it's both.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd be interested to put the whole human evolution into the context of the MPP, maximum power principle, like how, yeah, human societies, human cultures, or even human populations respond to more energy available, how that shaped civilization, how that shaped our
well, may
behavior.
I recommend the book I put up as the second slide of this course, Energy and the Wealth of Nations.
I
If
still have
you're
to read it,
spring
but
for
yeah,
that, then it will contribute to that in some detail and review
thanks.
the literature. It does that. Okay, Melissa, you doing well?
Doing good. Thank you.
Okay, well, I want a question from you next time.
Okay.
Melissa expressed a great interest in energy. She was the first email I got from anybody in this course. Okay, well, I'm available. Anybody has a comment you want to send to me, chall@esf.edu. And otherwise, we'll see you in a week. And we will be further the examination of the human cultural evolution with fossil fuels, ultimately. And this will lead us into a consideration of humans and the present situation, which changes each hour.
Least.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Look forward to
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye,
Bye
thank
bye.
you.
Thank you.
Oh, let's see. What's going on here? Why is it on twice? Oh, by the way, what's going on?